Welcome back, everyone. Today we're gonna change the spark plugs on my Jeep VJ with the 4.7 liters V8 engine. It's a pretty straightforward job. Should not be too complicated or take too long time. But as we all know, with Jeeps, there's always a surprise coming up when you're doing stuff, especially if they are old. We're going to use the iridium spark plugs because they are considered to be the better kind on the market. And I don't want to redo this so often, so I go with the best one that lasts the longest. The tools you need for this is pretty basic. You need a socket wrench and you need some spark plugs sockets, and this universal joint could also be useful. First thing I'm going to do is to remove the air intake. This is pretty easy. You just untighten this screw, that screw, and the screw in there. There is also 10mm screws underneath here and on the other side over here. In my case, I don't have them there. The previous owner seems to have removed them, and I'm not sure if they are actually needed because this is pretty solid even without them. When all the screws are untightened, you need to remove this vacuum hose, which just pulls out. And now you could start to remove your air intake. Since the spark plugs are related to electronics, and since we're also gonna disconnect other electronics, I recommend you to unplug your negative wire on the battery. You will get better access if you remove your connector to the throttle position sensor and idle air control, as well as the sensor behind here. Just put this wire harness away, and now you have much more space around to work with. The spark plug is located under this coil, and you have 4 of these on each side. Start by unplugging the coil and screw it off. My recommendation is that you're doing these ones one by one. When it's unplugged, you just pull it up. And this is a good opportunity to inspect it and see that it's all good. You clearly see your spark plug down here, and that's where you put your socket to screw it off. There's a lot of tools on the market to remove spark plugs. Either they have rubber inside or a magnet. In this case, it has a magnet, and it's also the longer one. So put it down and make sure you have it around the spark plug. And from here, it should just be to untighten it and pull it off. They should come off pretty easy. You just break them loose and then you pull it up. And here it is. It's actually don't look too bad. I've seen much worse. But well, it's always nice to have new spark plugs, so you know the history of the car by yourself. Before you continue, you should compare the new spark plug with the old one to make sure that they have the same length and that they look the same. Because if the threads are longer, it could damage the piston in your engine, and that's something that you want to avoid. In this case, it looks all fine. So the next step is to check the gap. My vehicle shows the spark plug type and gap on this label here, and it's 0.40 in gap. Even if my spark plugs are pre-gapped, it's always a good idea to check out that the gap is correct. To check the gap, I use this tool that states a number, and you are finding the right number for your application. And if it doesn't have it, you could combine two of these together to get the right thickness. In this case, I have 0.40, which is equal to 1 millimeter. I just put it in between and check it. And it's a little bit bigger than it's supposed to be. And the way to adjust it is just to hit it like this. Very lightly, and then recheck it. It should be pretty tight. Basically, you should be able to have it in here and not move it up and down. And that's almost where I am at now. So just a little hit. That's it. Now I'm ready to go. And I'm also going to put a light coat of anti-seize on the threads before I put it back in. And on this ceramic, I'm going to put some dielectric grease. But before you put any anti-seize, read in the manual for your spark plugs and see if they specify if you should have it or if you should not. In this case, they don't write anything about it, so I just assume that it's fine to put it. There is special spark plugs that have a coating on the threads, and if they have this coating, it's not required to put any coating on it yourself. Since you have the coil off, this is a perfect opportunity to use some contact spray and clean it off a little bit. Either you let this dry off or you're using the air compressor. So I'm putting a very thin coat of anti-seize on the threads here. That's it. Then I'm taking the dielectric grease and put a very light coat on the ceramic. This will keep moisture out and stop corrosion. Now it's time to put it back in. Then I'm using my tool. And I start to thread it by hand. This should go on very easy. And if they don't, then you should take it up and rethread it, because then you're probably not in the right thread. The spark plug is as tight as it gets by hand. And the torque spec now is 20 feet-pounds or 27 Newton meters. And if you don't have a torque wrench, you can basically install it snug and then turning the wrench around 1/4 of a turn. Time to put the coil back, but before I do that, I put a light coat of dielectric grease on the rubber booth here and get it in. It's time to put the coil back, and you just push it down the same way as you got it off and push it in place. Then you tighten it down and put the connector back on. That was the first one, and the rest one is the same. You just unscrew it, pull it up, and check the gaps and continue. Once when you come in here, it's a little bit tight, and especially on the passenger side, that is the trickiest one. And you might need to pull the dipstick aside a little bit. But when we come there, I'm going to turn back the camera and I'm going to show you how I do that. It's time to do the trickiest one. It's in here and the dipstick is in the way. There's not a lot of space and there's a lot of stuff in the way. And first step is to disconnect it. That's the easiest part. Second step is to untie the screw. And there's a vacuum line that goes exactly where the screw is, so it's tight. Going to start with a small wrench and see if I could get that in there. And this one has the bendable joint, which helps a lot. And hopefully I could continue by hand. That works. Now I don't want to drop this. There's also a ground located on this one just to make it a little bit more pain in the butt. And the screw is off. Take off the ground. Now you should be able to pull the coil off. That came off quite easy. Now you have to get it out. And if you turn it, you could pull it up, and then you could jiggle it out here somehow. Now we need to be able to get our socket on here. I'm going to try to put a U-joint on it and an extension, and yes, that worked. From here I should be able to take it by hand. And the spark plug is out. We are halfway there. It's time to try to get the spark plug, the new spark plug, back in. And I'm starting by hand tightening it. And time to go there with the U-joint. With the U-joint in position, I should be able to tighten it. I could get the U-joint, the socket off, and the last step would be to get the coil back on. If you have a wife or a kid with small hands, this is a good opportunity to use those hands. And last step now is to tighten that bolt. And for that we used this one, which is very handy for this part. Last step is to connect the wires. And that's it. That was the hardest one. I'm finally done, and all the spark plugs is where they should be. I hooked up all the wires I pull out, and the last step is to reinstall the air intake, and when you're doing that you also have to put back the vacuum hose that you took off. Take a final look before you're putting this one back on, and make sure that all the grounds are back, that you reinstall everything you took off and stuff like that. And this one is pretty straightforward to get on. Just put it on like this, and then get it on the airbox as well. Make sure that everything is solid. Reinstall the vacuum hose. The last step is to reinstall your battery. And when your battery is installed, you should start the car and make sure that everything works as it's supposed. All your spark plugs are new and replaced. This was not very hard. It's just a hassle when it comes to the spark plugs that are furthest in. But the solution to that issue is to use a universal joint and some extenders or some sort of wrench that can be bent and can be approached in different angles. Now you should take a test ride and see if it runs okay, and if you've done everything right, there is no lights or anything coming up, and you could enjoy your Jeep for a while. If you like this video and want to see more videos when I release new videos, you should click here to subscribe. And if you want to see more videos when I'm doing stuff on the Jeep, you should click here to see the full playlist with how to do stuff on the Jeep. Thanks for watching, and I see you soon.